working. So.
Is there audio now? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we're back on and we solved that problem. I truly apologize. As we see, one of the main reasons why it's so important to have in-person instruction is so that we don't have these technology problems. So we're really working hard here, and hopefully we don't run into another glitch of that nature. So let's begin again. The purpose of this evening is to make sure that our entire community is updated with what has transpired in the past week, and then what will take place over the next week and 2 weeks in front of us. We all, I believe, know by now that last Friday evening, our New York State Department of Health provided updated guidance to school districts in New York State. And we're going to start this evening by giving you an overview of what that guidance is. And then we'll talk about Kenton specifically, what to expect, some hurdles that still exist as we continue to transition, and then what we can do together to help through this. We'll also have questions, as you can see, during this most recent part. You've been asking questions, and we have a team of people here at Kenmore Middle that are answering those questions as they come in. And we'll close tonight with me actually discussing some of those questions and giving more details live based on your questions and feedback. So without further ado, we're already running a little bit behind, and I'm going to get started. Once again, just to give you the format, my name is Sabatino Samato. I'm the superintendent in Kenton. We have our many instructional team members as well as support team members that are here at Kenmore Middle answering questions as we go through this live event. Much of this presentation is replicated from what I presented the other night to our Board of Education, and there is a little bit more that's included as well. So new guidance was released. You'll see on your screen, I believe we're sharing this on the screen as well. You'll see on the screen, I'm going to go through a 4-slide PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is also available under the Reopening tab on the Kenton Schools website. And if you go to the last section of that Reopening tab, new social distancing, new distancing guidelines, you can find all of these links right underneath that. And a link to the 24-page document from the New York State Department of Health can also be found on that part of our website. So some major changes. Let's go over those, and some of this I'll be reading and then I'll be highlighting as well to make sure I don't miss any of the facts. At the elementary school level, a minimum of 3 feet of social distancing between students is permissible. You can find that in the document right on page 7. At the middle and high school level, 3 feet is permissible in areas with lower rates of transmission based on CDC criteria, and higher rates of transmission and higher transmission areas. It is only permissible in schools that are cohorting. So let's talk about this just a little bit. In New York State, they went with the CDC guidance, and in the CDC guidance, the CDC broke transmission rates down into 4 areas of transmission. We have a blue, a yellow, an orange, and a red. And I'll talk about those criteria here in just one moment. In this New York State document, it also not only adopted that, but did break it down a little bit further for us. There's 2 different measures, and you'll see that within this document. A 7-day positivity rate. And folks, this is what we've come to know in New York State, actually in Erie County. Let's talk about Erie County only. When we're talking about positivity rate. Just to break that down for people, it's the number of students or number of individuals that are testing positive in the numerator. The denominator is out of the total number tested. That's where we're typically getting our positivity rate. The CDC as well as New York State also broke it down into, and we're used to seeing this from our friends at Erie County recently, that also the number of positive cases out of a total 100,000 population. So you see that in these next two bullets. And whichever is higher, that's where that region lands for that transmission rate. Now, unfortunately, right now in Erie County, we are in a red transmission rate location. What that means is our elementaries are approved to attend and be 3 feet of distance. We'll talk about some of the caveats a little bit later in this presentation that go along with that. But that cohorting at middle school and high school. Now, some may ask, well, what does that cohorting mean? We're used to using that term cohorting in education. You may have heard it before when it comes to graduation rate. Students are cohorted based on the students that enter 9th grade together, and then students that enter the cohort along the way, all the way up to graduation, that graduating cohort. In this circumstance, it's a very similar definition. It's students that remain together throughout the school day. And cohort would exemplify that those students are together all day. Why we have never been that way, I shouldn't say never, but this year we have not been that way, and in previous years in Kenton at the middle and high school level, is that it tremendously limits the amount of courses that students can take. And in Kenton, we've always had many offerings, a lot of rich coursework, options for our students, options from electives to advanced coursework, to remediation, to targeted intervention that may be needed for any of our students. At the secondary level, that is why cohorting, we are not currently cohorted in Kenton. So I just wanted to clear up that cohorting definition. A 5.3% rate as of April 13th. Erie County meets the criteria as a lower transmission area based on positivity rate, must be below 8%, but meets the criteria for this higher transmission rate based on total new cases, currently 377 out of 100,000. We would have to have less than, as a region, less than 100 new cases per 100,000 over the past 7 days. That's where you see the rest of that bullet. And there goes that final bullet about cohorting at the high schools. In all schools, 6 feet is required. Now, these are the caveats that also go along with elementary schools. 6 feet is required in common areas where possible. During eating, it's required. While singing and playing wind instruments. During physical education classes. Between children and adults, and among adults, from adult to adult. You could find that on page 8. You'll see how that is described on page 8 of this New York State document. This is a big one. In this new document, physical barriers are no longer recommended. We'll talk about that a little bit later on this evening. Districts must, at the end of planning, this is part of the planning process, this session, also the feedback that we're collecting and collective decisions that we're making based on that feedback. But districts must submit and post the revised plans and solicit the community feedback. That's on page 7. And guidance on athletics on page 7, it says remains unchanged. Those documents have been released recently and made available to the public. So to go on in our presentation, therefore, what are we striving for? Why I'm falling short of saying this is the plan, because this plan is still being developed based on feedback, based on our community meeting, our stakeholder meeting. Tonight we have everyone that's involved, from our fabulous teachers in Kenton, our great administrators in Kenton, to our community members in Kenton. So this is open to everyone, and everyone is providing questions and feedback based on as we go through this evening. Continuing areas of focus. Now, I want everyone to understand what we're going to talk about are some changes, some specific things to Kenton, also some challenges in this next section to be very transparent with the community. So folks, you saw in that previous slide, in that overview, 6 feet has to exist while eating. Now, when we were in our hybrid model at the elementary level, we're still going to be remaining in a hybrid model. I want to be very clear for that. We're striving for Monday, April 26th for our elementary K through 4 to move to a 5-day model. But one of the challenges that still exists is that 6 feet must be maintained for breakfast and lunch while eating. Now, one of the bigger struggles is breakfast and lunch. And people will look at me and say, Samato, well, why is it harder for breakfast than it is for lunch? When when most schools schedule their lunch periods, they have multiple lunch periods throughout the day. Those lunch periods, anywhere from 2, 3 to 4 lunch periods to make sure an entire school can eat. Our schools, our elementary schools, up to this point have been eating in the classroom because they've been 6 feet apart. Now with 3 feet for instruction, we are looking at ways for the lunch period to have kids in the classroom, but also kids in other locations, and we have multiple periods to do that. During breakfast, everyone enters at one time, and that has been a challenge. We were hopeful that we could keep in our back pocket that we would send breakfast home if we couldn't figure out breakfast. We've been advised by the state, we've seen communications with the state that that's no longer an option, that students, if they are going to eat in school, have to eat in the morning. So our schools are working to get that figured out. I just want the entire community to be prepared that some of the drawbacks might be that we have to extend breakfast. Breakfast may be longer than a quick just grab and go, and our schools will be working with that with their teams over the next week and a half to still figure out before this April 26th date. Meal kits. Meal kits, this is also one of the changes that I really want our elementary families to know. Meal kits would no longer be available for elementary students attending school in person, since elementary students will be served breakfast and lunch every school day. They would still be available for those not attending in person, so our VLA families, so that a procedure is currently being developed with our food service department, and we'll have more details coming out on that. So understand, meal kits are available for everyone right now because we are in a hybrid mode, but once we are back to school full time, it is not available for those students and families that are attending full time. Pick up and drop off. I really want to thank all of our families here in Kenton. People really stepped up to the plate. This bullet goes with the next bullet of transportation. Pick up and drop off. We asked our families where they could please either walk children to school or bring children and drop them off. And we've had such a tremendous response. Now the great thing is that our transportation pretty much is all set. We're pretty good with having one child per seat, unless they're siblings and from the same household. Then we may have students sitting together. Now folks, I'm not going to lie to you, here and there may be some students that have to sit together in one-off situations. All the students will be masked, but we're doing the best that we can to avoid that. Right now we have everything charted so that the only students that are sitting together are siblings or from the same household. So that's a great thing. But pick up and drop off, as you can imagine, will be quite more congested with more families helping us out in that partnership. So please, next week, you can expect that all schools throughout the district will be having their own community parent forums where they'll explain, and they may make some asks from some of our families. For example, now this isn't outlined in any school plan yet, but a school principal may send out to families, we're really looking for cooperation from our families to drop these students off between 9 and 9:15 and these students off between 9:15 and 9:30. That's just an example. That's a very basic example. Maybe A students are dropped off first and then B students are dropped off second. Possibly. I'm asking our families, if they get that from their individual school buildings, please do everything that you can to help out. You've been tremendous. We've all been through a lot this year. I know we're all COVID fatigued, and anything that we can do to keep on making this happen together, that's what I'd ask for our entire community and our schools over the next week. Dividers. Folks, we are going to be removing our dividers. Why? Because in Kenton, we go by the guidance. The guidance is very clear in this document that dividers are no longer recommended. It is very interesting in this document that there's a lot more attention that is paid to circulation, airflow in the classrooms, as well as filtration. And I'm happy to say our B&G department has done a tremendous job all along. We've been focused on airflow from the very beginning, exceeding the requirements for airflow in the classrooms. I don't know if any of the recommendations for removal of dividers has to do with airflow, but I know it is specifically in the guidance, and that's what we'll be doing. So we will be taking those dividers down during our class periods, as well during lunch. Lunch, remember, they are 6 feet apart. Even though they are unmasked, they are socially distant. According to that metric in the classroom, everyone will leave their masks on, and we'll talk about some questions about that later on in the presentation. Now, folks, one of the challenges that we have to be prepared for is that the quarantine rules and requirements to go into quarantine will still remain unchanged. So what does that mean? That means that if we did have a positive student in a classroom, of course we work with Erie County Department of Health. That is happening daily. We have people dedicated in our Human Resources Department that are on the phone and working with Erie County Department of Health every day. Erie County Department of Health has been wonderful in that work with us in looking at students or classrooms where we might have positive cases. But for example, in the hybrid model, if we had a positive case and students would not necessarily have to be quarantined because they were 6 feet apart, it may result in higher quarantine levels if we did have a positive case, because now we're only 3 feet apart, where quarantine requirements would still be 6 feet apart. Now let's talk about that. We have to be prepared that that may be a result, and we may have students going into quarantine. In the event that a handful of students were in quarantine, they would receive asynchronous work from their teachers in the classroom, just as if it was a regular school year and a student was absent due to illness. Teachers provide that work, that catch-up work for students to do. Now, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, and why I say that is because we have done it on occasion, as many other districts have this year. If there were so many students in the classroom and we had to move to a virtual model for a set of days, that could happen as well. So we know that everything that we see as challenges, these challenges are no different than the challenges we've seen throughout this entire pandemic. Is it challenging? Yes. Is it nerve-wracking because we haven't been through it yet? It absolutely is. But together, staying positive, making sure that we're following all of the guidelines, making sure that we're masked up in classrooms. Our community, a big lift, a heavy lift for this last quarter of school, making sure that we're doing, that's the partnership, everything that we could do in the community to lower our transmission rates. All of this is going to contribute to our success for the end of the school year. We've been doing everything wonderfully together. The things that we didn't think that we were going to be able to accomplish, we've been able to accomplish together, just like we will when it comes to this new social distancing. Technology. There will be some technology changes. So at the elementary level, I want everyone to be prepared for, we've made a huge jump this year, ladies and gentlemen. We've transitioned fully to one-to-one devices, and we even have newer devices that will be coming in at the elementary level. After we return, you'll get more information on that. Some devices will be changed out. Also, some of our youngest students will not have to take those devices to and from school daily. And more information will come out from the individual schools on that. So I want everyone to be prepared for that. excuse me, all of the districts, I want everyone to be very familiar with this. Our cleaning, our disinfecting protocols, they are still going to stay in place. Our teams are going to be working hard in the evenings, just like they always have been. Disinfecting, hygiene, the temperature screenings when students enter, and any visitor might have to come into the building will still be taking place. Contact tracing, and we'll be working with New York State or Erie County Department of Health and following all those New York State requirements. Now this is a big one, and I want to be the person, I said this the other night, but I want to first explain this and then also send out an apology, especially to all of our staff, because I did drop the ball with something most recently. Our Group B students, next week, folks, we're still in hybrid next week at the elementary level. Still in hybrid. But if you remember before break, this new guidance hadn't been released yet. So what we did was we made a plan to bring Wednesdays back online because we weren't even sure if guidance was going to be released. And that first Wednesday was supposed to be next week, and we're keeping that in place. But I originally said A students would be returning. Now that we're going to 5 days a week, when we looked at the math, A students were actually having a couple more days of instruction in total, in-person instruction this year, than B students. So I made the quick decision on Monday evening to switch next Wednesday to B. And I wanted our families to know that right away. This is where the apology comes in. I'm a big fan of being communicative, making sure everybody knows what's going on. And unfortunately, I let our families know, and I didn't let our school buildings know until the next day. So I understand on Tuesday there was some miscommunication in the schools, and I need to own that, not our teachers. That's not our teachers not knowing what's going on. That's not our administrators not knowing what's going on. That's me as your superintendent trying to get something out as quickly as I can to families and then not following up until the next day because we made that decision so late. So I do apologize to all of our families, all of our staff for that. But next Wednesday will be a day of attendance for B students. So Monday, Tuesday next week, A, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, B. We are continuing to look at options and opportunities for our middle and high schools. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Folks, our middle and high schools are not cohorted, so they are remaining at 6 feet. But some great news is that we're continuing to look at Wednesdays, and more information will be coming out from our individual high schools on individual work, synchronous instruction that will be provided on Wednesdays. And we are going to absolutely provide targeted instruction for this last quarter of the year on Wednesdays for those secondary students, especially our high school students, especially our seniors. Graduation must be the priority right now for those seniors. Senioritis is a real thing. It's an even more real thing during a pandemic. So we have to make sure that our kiddos are focused. Families, once again, that's the partnership. Folks, kids should not feel that Wednesdays are a day off. This is a very difficult time. We know that. We're still in a pandemic. But Wednesdays, coming from your superintendent, to your teachers, to your parents, Wednesdays are not a day off. The expectation is what you're doing to make sure your work is completed, to make sure your studies are on top. There is no excuse for any students not completing the work that needs to be done on those Wednesdays. That's my principle coming out of me right now. So please make sure, I know it's difficult, please make sure that we're staying on top of it in that fashion, students. If Erie County were to move to a lower transmission rate, our schools will be ready, our secondary schools, to move to 3 feet. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is the transparency coming out on me right now. Remember what I told you about lunch at the elementary level. Remember what I told you about breakfast at the elementary level. Our largest elementary school right now is between 500 and 600 students, thereabouts, okay? Our largest high school is anywhere between 12 and 1,400 students. So imagine the challenge that I said exists for eating at the elementary, and now doubling that challenge of eating at the secondary if transmission rates come down and we still have to remain at 6 feet for eating. So I'm not going to lie to you, that is a tremendously heavy lift. We're figuring, our school teams are figuring it out in the event that secondary, middle school, and high school could make that transmission rate lowers, and we are able to move to 3 feet during the instructional time. But right now, I want you to be ready in the event that that were to change in the future. On April 12th, New York State released new guidance. You know, there was a great moment the other night at the board meeting. One of our fantastic young women from one of our high schools came and spoke to the board during comment time and asked that we continue to look at guidance for proms and for graduations. And the great news for her that night, and the great news for everyone, new guidance came out on Monday evening. And it was updated April 12th, and our high school teams are looking at that guidance and offering options and getting feedback, gathering that feedback from students and families. Now, folks, being very clear about this, that new guidance, two of the magic numbers that everybody has to remember, 100 and 200 when it comes to those senior end of the year type of celebrations. 100 right now is the max indoors, 200 is the max outdoors. There are caveats to this. So for example, in that guidance, it talks about if you exceed 200, you can exceed 200, but for example, people would need to be vaccinated in order to exceed 200. Or proof of vaccination, you have to demonstrate proof of vaccination in order to attend, or you have to receive a negative test within 72 hours of the event. So the schools are very in tune with this guidance since the beginning of the week, and they're working with their communities to come up with options and exploring different options. The final bullet on this page, assessments for the 3 through 8 level will still be next week during our hybrid week. On Monday, A students will be taking, and it's a very much shorter abbreviated ELA assessment this year. It does not count towards accountability or evaluation, but ELA will be on Monday for students, and for A students, ELA will be Monday of next week, makeup on Tuesday. ELA will be for B students on Thursday, I believe, of next week, and the makeup day will be Friday. So that's still during our hybrid week. Full transparency, want to make sure everyone understands that that is still proceeding as planned. New York State did request a waiver. They were not granted the waiver from the U.S. Department of Education. So that is currently where we are as New York State, and major modifications have been made to those assessments because those waivers were not granted. Next steps. So a recording of our board meeting from this past Tuesday when I first presented this slide deck will be up on our website. That's one piece of information. The district reopening task force met on Wednesday morning, April 14th, to discuss these developments just yesterday. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of my days this week, ladies and gentlemen. Our parent cabinet, a reminder, that is our 1 or 2 parent heads of our parent organizations at each of our schools, elementary, middle, and secondary. We met last evening, went through this slide deck, and also took questions and posted answers already on our website. They met last evening. We made a podcast of that. That can be found on our website. The virtual question answer meeting for all district stakeholders, that's this evening. We're going to go a little bit past 6 p.m. because we had those technical difficulties in the beginning, and that's the YouTube live event. The recording of this and the text messages from all the comments and the questions being answered will be posted for those who cannot participate. That will be on our website. Additionally, we're going to leave an opening for all of our stakeholders. We'll be able to submit additional questions and comments through our district website prior to 4 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, April 16th. And then an FAQ will be created and posted online, hopefully by the very beginning of next week, based on all this information that we've gathered from the community. We'll also have our Kentown Weekly Connection tomorrow. That will be very much like this presentation. We'll dedicate the entire Weekly Connection to reopening. And this revised reopening plan will be on the district website next week. And it will also be submitted to New York State Education Department and the Erie County Department of Health once it is completed. Why it's not completed? Because we're still gathering the feedback and making adjustments where we can. Elementary schools will conduct, actually I asked the secondary principals as well, so all schools should be conducting information meetings. They may be virtual meetings, they may be something similar to this next week to provide their stakeholders, their parents, with the individual details regarding all the information that I shared this evening that pertain to their school. So for example, those pickup and drop off times will be different from school to school. The breakfast plan will be different from school to school. The lunch plan. And it's very fair for those schools to be able to share those specific plans, those specific details, I should say, with their communities next week. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the entire presentation. I want to hit on some of the highlights. Once again, not this upcoming week, but the week after, we are striving for, the plan is to bring back our elementary students 5 days a week. 3 feet of social distancing in the classroom. We're following the guidance. 6 feet when they eat, 6 feet during musical play, 6 feet during physical education, 6 feet between adults, 6 feet between adults and children. We've always said in Kenton, we follow the guidance. We're not getting subjective, we're following the guidance. We will follow the guidance to the T, and we will implement, and our teams have been doing a fantastic job. Folks, before we get to questions, and I start talking about and discussing some of the questions, I want to hit a couple more areas. First, no one has worked harder, I'm a little biased, but I will tell you, than our teams in Kenton. Our administrative teams, our teacher teams have always looked for solutions and always looked to how we can get the most instruction. I want to give you evidence of that really quickly. For example, at the elementary level, if you remember back in October, we made a shift before we brought elementary students back to give our VLA students individual teachers instead of having them log on, so that those individual teachers could focus directly on our youngest students that were staying home for the entire duration. They were not coming back to hybrid. That rubbed people the wrong way at the time. We did that, and why our staff made the jump to do that and were so cooperative doing that is because they knew it was the best for kids. And they knew in the future it would be the best for kids when we came to this point that we might be able to bring students back to more in-person learning. Let me give you another example. At our secondary level right now, even though we're in a pandemic, is receiving, in my opinion, that I could provide you evidence with as well, the best instructional model possible. Our secondary teachers provide 4 days of synchronous instruction. I highlighted one of our teachers recently from Hoover, Miss Hall, and her team working together, and Patrick helped me also with more names that we've highlighted eventually, but our secondary teams, this was a highlight not just of that team, but what our secondary teams do here in Kenton. And they take our kids that are A kids, let's just say if it's a Monday or Tuesday, that are in front of them, and have them working collaboratively together with B kids who are at home logged in at the same time. And those kids are working simultaneously. That's what our teachers plan and have done from the beginning at our secondary level. Folks, that is not happening everywhere. I promise you, without naming any other places, any other schools, any other systems, I promise you that is the best model at the secondary level. So as much as it is bad news and a challenge that we see the guidance for our secondary, the good news is that they've had the best instruction all along that we could possibly have, and our teachers have been the ones that have been doing that. Our administrators have been the ones that have been working, our support staff, to make that happen. Support staff working with kids while teachers are working together, bringing kids, putting them in breakout rooms electronically. So yes, I'm a little biased, and our people have been doing a great job. It has been tough. It's been the toughest on our families. We know this. But please understand, together through this partnership, folks, we've been through a pandemic for the past year. Sometimes we have so much COVID fatigue that we are automatically critical. Our people have been really second to none this entire time. So I wanted to just take a minute to remind everyone where we've been, what we've done to make in prediction of this day, of this announcement, the tough decisions and the work that people have done to put this into place. And it's been through the collaboration and the tough work that our families have done to make it happen. So let's get to some questions also. If a student tests positive in a classroom with students spaced 3 feet apart, would the entire class need to quarantine or only those students within 6 feet? Well, we've talked about this. There may actually be some circumstances, fully transparent, where there are so many students that need to quarantine that we move that entire class to a virtual class for several days, maybe even up to 10 days, where the teacher will be instructing virtually. And the students will be at home virtually because there are so many that have to be quarantined, because we know that will be the best instructional model because there's so many that have to quarantine. That could happen. But depending on working with Erie County Department of Health hand in hand, learning what students need to be for that situation and don't need to be quarantined, that will always be the deciding factor. Each circumstance is very unique. There is no blanket approach to this. So I hope that answers that question. Even though dividers are no longer recommended in classrooms, can the district choose to leave dividers in place? We are choosing to not leave dividers in place. Folks, the guidance is very clear. The guidance is put in place just like dividers were recommended, and we spent tons of money to begin with to get those dividers in place, to have that safety in place. Now it's being recommended, and I'm sure because the science shows it, that dividers, when we've worked with Erie County Department of Health, dividers have never been the difference maker during this pandemic. Masks have been the difference maker during this pandemic. We want to make sure that we're not impeding that airflow in that classroom. Airflow will include, as weather gets nicer, teachers will be opening windows. Teachers, I always want you to feel free to open windows. We'll have the windows open on buses. Jim Nestico will continue talking and working with our wonderful bus drivers that have been doing a great job this entire time to make sure those windows are open to increase airflow. But it's about ventilation and airflow, and that's what we'll continue to do. That will be a decision. We're still looking at lunchrooms, but I'll tell you, I'm leaning more towards that those dividers come down in lunchrooms because they will have to be 6 feet apart in lunchrooms. So we do not see, and there's nothing in the guidance that signifies that dividers should remain up. Will mask breaks be practiced if students are within 3 feet of each other? Mask breaks are permissible only when students are 6 feet. In a webinar yesterday with the state was very clear. Mask breaks only when students are 6 feet. So teachers will have their way that if a student needs a mask break, that they'll make sure that that student is 6 feet apart from everyone else. If a student needs to step to another part of the classroom to take that mask break. So I have to encourage everybody, we're much further into this pandemic. Even our little ones, I know I've seen little ones when they don't have a mask on, it breaks my heart that the first thing a 6-year-old looks to us and says before they leave their house or before they go into a store, Mommy or Daddy, I need my mask. 2 years ago, we would have never thought that our little ones would be thinking that way. They are. We're in a pandemic, and the masks are required, and for right now, they're required all the time. So we will continue to encourage that and require that in our schools. It's a non-negotiable, just like it has been all year. Why not continue the hybrid instructional model? The evidence is clear that the pandemic has resulted in a significant learning loss, particularly for younger students, and that there is no alternative to in-person, face-to-face instruction. The same soapbox that all of us, especially me, have been standing on all year. This has been my main elevator conversation. Although we have created a very effective instructional model, our students can't afford to lose any more day. Folks, let me put it to you this way. Since the beginning of the year, when you really look at the numbers, any one of our elementary students have had anywhere between 43 days of in-person instruction when we get to the end of this week. I told you we've been looking at the math, that's why we shifted to that B day for next week. Starting on the 26th, we will be able to accomplish almost just as much amount of days, over 40 days of in-person instruction just the last quarter of the school year. That's how significant it is that we're trying to get students, because we know that nothing beats in-person instruction. And folks, I want to remind you, I know that we get nervous with numbers. I know that we see things out in our community. Notice that they wrote the guidance to reflect that. And also, I want to remind everyone that the evidence has been clear that schools have been some of the most safest areas throughout our community, because we are so stringent with our cleaning protocols, with our distancing protocols, with our mask protocols, with the requirements that we must stringently adhere to, with our during the day cleaning as well as after school cleaning, with our making sure that how we transition through the hallways and that everyone is masked up. So I just want to reiterate that this is the focus. We're not staying with the hybrid at the elementary level, and we are moving to that 5 days of in-person instruction, gauging starting on the 26th. So I know we'll get through it together, and we'll work together like we have this entire year. What options are being considered for Wednesdays at the secondary level? Middle and high schools will post on their website outlines of synchronous instructional support for Wednesdays. This should be available by the end of the day, Friday, April 16th, and they're still working at that. Folks, I just want to encourage everyone to understand what's happening on Wednesdays. Targeted intervention, individual work between teachers and some students, extra planning and preparation. Remember what I told you at our secondary level. Our teachers teach both in person and students at home simultaneously at the secondary level. And trust me, our teachers do not complain. Our teachers are not can't do people. They are always can do people. I'm just always being very transparent with our community how much actually does take place on our Wednesdays between our teachers and students, our teachers in the building, our teachers also with planning for all of this that we're doing during this pandemic. What is the plan for Regents exams? High schools have detailed updates with frequently asked questions about end-of-the-year Regents exams, as well as local course exams, posted on their websites this Friday. So folks, of course, Regents a priority, but also if there's an end-of-the-year exam, kids need to be very astute to that and not shirk from that responsibility of what those requirements are, class by class, teacher by teacher. The New York State Department of Education plans to administer 4 Regents exams this year. There's only 4 in June. English Language Arts, we went over this previously when it was first released in the Weekly Connection, but just to reiterate, English Language Arts on June 17th, Living Environment on June 22nd, Algebra 1 on June 23rd, and Earth Science, the written test only, on June 24th. And those students in Earth Science understand when we're saying not the lab requirement, the written portion of the exam only on June 24th. These examinations will be administered on the assigned Regents days in order to ensure the health and safety of students and teachers. Students receive who are currently in the remote model, the full virtual model. You're invited to take the assessments on the assessment day, but not required. And Regents exams will not be used for accountability purposes. Additional information will be sent out from the high schools. Folks, challenge yourself, absolutely focus and study. We know the importance of those Regents exams, and the state, once again, applied for that waiver. A blanket waiver was not granted. They do still have the requirements for those exams, and that's why those exams have to be administered this year. What options or venues are being explored for end of the year events? We talked about this, that April 12th document, new guidance, and the guidance includes different rules and limits. Schools are continuing to review the guidance and explore different options. Other factors include, so let's talk about this for a second. We've thought about, can we do things on our fields? And sure, the schools are looking at that, but also let's talk about that we have millions of dollars invested into our turf fields. Great, and we want our community to use them. We have them open during the day. Trust me, not many communities do function that way, and I'm a big fan. I want our facilities to feel like community facilities, and more to come in future years, how we're going to even expand that. But we also can't drill tents down into our turf fields and ruin our turf fields for events like this. So not saying that it's off the table, but I'm just giving you some of the logistics that go along with this when we're looking at, can we do things on fields? We can't put stages that weigh thousands and thousands of pounds onto a turf field and chance ruining a turf field, but we might be able to do things that are lighter, things that don't require a tent, or other types of venues, or have that as a possibility based on feedback with other possibilities. Our high schools are looking at that with their communities, and they'll make those plans and those decisions based on that feedback and that consistent collaboration. We know it's a tough year for seniors. It stinks for seniors. Last year, it was terrible for seniors at the end of the year. At least seniors had 3/4 of their year. Our seniors have been in a hybrid model only since January, and they missed a lot of their events that they're used to. Parents of seniors watching their babies grow up and not having those senior activities. Trust me, folks, we get it, and we're right there with you, and we're going to continue to push the envelope to do as much as can possibly be done. I just want to give you encouraging news. Last year, we heard the same thing about seniors, and it was even more challenging last year. And they did a graduation parade, and kids would get out of the car and receive, and it sounded terrible at the time, but let me tell you something. I was already announced as the next superintendent. I watched him from afar as I watched previous Superintendent Bavino with our amazing administrators and teachers cheering students on, and those events turned out to be a great success. So I know our schools have experience with finding ways to make things happen, and they will make things happen. So stay tuned, and kiddos, stay positive, and of course, stay respectful, and let's get this figured out. Can additional sports be live streamed and recorded? And Mr. Banker and our athletics teams and our coaches that do a phenomenal job are always looking at ways. We have people contracted. Mr. Banker was even exploring more ways today, not even just for the pandemic, but for the future. So the athletics department will consider options moving forward for the spring season that starts on May 3rd, and they're going to continue. And schools are looking at options. Our IT department are looking at options for other things other than sports to be live streamed, musical performances, any other thing that we can have. So folks, everything is on the table, and we will continue to look at that. And thank you for some of our parents last night for providing that feedback. That's feedback that's continuing to even be implemented as early as today based on that. Under what circumstances would the district consider that transmission is taking place in a classroom? Folks, we always do this with Erie County Department of Health. Erie County Department of Health are the experts We've become very good. We have some people that are very good at, I think even including myself and our building leaders, but even some people in human resources that are becoming more expert, but I consider the experts to be the Erie County Department of Health, and we'll continue working with them hand in hand on each individual situation. Whether it's based on positive cases or contact tracing in an individual classroom, we will always look at that. Evidence that I could give you, there have been times this year where I've shut down a school. Not because cases have gone crazy, but because there was enough there that we said, maybe it's not a trend, but we want to just be extra precautious. We work on things to show extra caution, following the guidance, and we will continue to do so. How will elementary schools handle lunch? In many different ways. Let me give you an example. Right now, lunch is in the classroom, but they're 6 feet apart because they're in a hybrid. So some students may stay in the classroom, some student may be moved to a cafeteria, some students may be moved to an auditorium, which is terrible, but this year we're going to do it. Some students may be moved to an eating section of a hallway that is set up for kids to eat, always following fire code. So folks, there's a lot to consider. Exits, entrances, being able to make sure we're following fire code. So we will always think out of the box, but putting safety first when thinking out of the box. So a lot of these things are going to be taking place in schools. Will elementary school arrival and dismissals be staggered? Schools are exploring ways to stagger morning drop-off times and minimize crowding. I want to be clear though, dismissal presents unique challenges. So folks, our bus fleet, and trust me, we're always struggling to find drivers. Our drivers do an excellent job. Our transportation team, we even put a bus out on Sheridan, trying to attract people. We have signs in front of schools trying to attract people to apply. We're always looking for more people and more buses. But our buses come from Kenton. We don't subcontract. We hire our people. We run our buses. We pay for our gas. We do everything, maintain the buses. Our buses run 3 runs minimally every morning. And I'm talking about only the ones that are staying in the district. Okay, so we have a high school run, a middle school run, an elementary school run, so that everybody is fully aware. Not to mention that we have several runs. Jim Nestico, maybe you could give me a number while I'm having this conversation. We have runs for our parochial schools that are in district, our private schools that are in district, our parochial schools that are out of district, that our students may go to a different private or another school outside of our district, special services that students may need outside of the district, and those runs also are taking place simultaneously. Jim, do we have that number?
105 total.
105 every morning or daily?
Every morning, every afternoon.
Every afternoon, every morning, 105 other routes just outside of the Kenton public school system. So you can see everything becomes a heavy lift. There are many things to consider. Just like I've always said, that's why I say it's never just flipping a switch. There's a lot of planning, a lot of coordination that goes into all of this. Will middle school or high school special classes attend school on Wednesdays? And folks, there are challenges related to bringing them back on Wednesdays. Without bringing all students back to school on Wednesdays, for example, elective coursework that's offered. Some teachers are offering it in multiple places to multiple students, in person and virtual. A combination of synchronous and asynchronous, since teachers are using those Wednesdays to focus on smaller group and remedial instruction, and we've gone through that already. So where it can, schools are still looking at that, and more information will come out. But like I've said, since the beginning, we've had 4 days of instruction, synchronous instruction with our secondary students. That really is second to none throughout the region. When will middle school and high school students be able to return to 5 days of in-person instruction? So when those transmission rates go below, based on those measures, I'll give you the measure, per 100,000 people in Erie County, we'd have to be below 100. 100 cases for that most recent 7-day rolling average, we're currently at 377. So that number would have to be below 100 to be in that acceptable level of transmission rate for our middle and high schools to be able to go back. Now, I'm not telling you that we're still not looking, especially at the middle school level, are there ways that we can make it happen? Because our middle school has more cohorting than our secondary, but it's not universal and it's not all the time. So our middle schools are continuing to explore that, and if we're able to figure something out, trust me, we're going to figure it out. But that is the challenge. Will a thorough cleaning be conducted each night? And the answer is absolutely. The district's extensive procedures for cleaning and disinfecting school buildings will continue to be practiced. This includes daily deep cleaning and disinfecting in preparation for the next school day. And folks, remember, you could go back to the videos that I know I get teased about all the time. Even in videos early on, I encouraged our community to remember Wednesdays are not a deep cleaning day. We deep clean every day. And we deep clean over the weekend, at night, on Wednesdays. Whenever we have students not in the building, we're deep cleaning. So yes, that will continue just as it did before. Should elementary schools be transitioning to 3 feet of social distancing at this time based on community transmission rates? And folks, I want to encourage you, we go by the guidance. The CDC gave that guidance. New York State followed it up, and this was one of the reasons why early on in this pandemic, the learning that I took away, that I shared with the community, is we always make the next best decision that we can make based on the current guidance. And that's what we do, so we do not get subjective. We are going with the experts that are telling us what is acceptable in schools and how to do this and what guidance we need to follow. Okay, can other events be live streamed? We talked about that. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Will students have the opportunity for snack time? Any eating would have to be at 6 feet of social distancing. So there will be challenges there. And folks, just being very, very honest, very transparent with you, that's what's happening right now. And schools are figuring out all of those details if and when those things can happen. Will there be extra effort to take the kids outside? Absolutely. And outside is always, when we can, be out in the air. Many of our schools do that now. I know I was just watching Hoover daily, walking out on tennis courts, and that's the middle school. The elementary school doing the same. I see Franklin doing the walks through Lincoln Park and around the building. So it's happening. I know I've seen Holmes doing it. It happens, Edison doing it all the time. And of course, the good thing that we have going for us right now is that the weather we are coming into nicer weather. Hopefully this trend can continue, and we'll be able to utilize the outside even more than we have been able to in the wintertime. This question, how would instruction be carried out if multiple students from a class or the entire class are quarantined? We talked about that. If in the event that we move an entire class either to quarantine or virtual learning, then virtual learning will take place with that teacher at the elementary level. If there's only a group of students, then asynchronous instruction, just like outside of the pandemic, when a kid is out sick or ill for many days, the teacher provides materials for that student to catch up on. And folks, remember, quarantine is not a Samato decision. It's not a Kenton decision. It is the guidance, and to tell you the truth, much of it really isn't even just an Erie County decision. The guidance is what drives it. And the guidance right now, and of course Erie County are our medical experts, they are telling us this is where quarantine goes, and they will work with us hand in hand in determining these individual classroom situations. So folks, now it comes to the end of our event this evening. We will continue to answer questions. We'll continue to take feedback. We'll continue to work with our schools. We'll continue to learn and make the next best decision that we can. Here's what I want everyone to leave here knowing. Our teachers are working their tails off. Our administrators are working their tails off. Our families are working their tails off. Our support staff is working their tails off. Together, we need to remain positive. None of this is easy, folks, and nothing has changed from back in August when I shared with you, for as many people feel one way, there's just as many people that feel another way, because that still exists in this uncertain time of this pandemic. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot together. We know how to be as safe as we possibly can be. We know what the data and what the science shows us about our youngest, and that really and how safe elementary schools are, and why the decision was made to move to 3 feet. And we will continue to get through this together, only if we remain positive and we choose to get through it together. Folks, that's all that we have. Remaining positive, being Kenton strong, being Kenton proud, and moving Kenton forward. And hopefully there's going to be a day that we will only have meetings like this talking about things outside of the realm of the pandemic. I look forward to those days together with you as your superintendent, and I especially look forward to how we're going to get through this next chapter together as one community. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Staff out there that are watching with us today, thank you for all of your hard work, and families, continue your great dedication and your hard work. Let's have a great night.